Hey everyone, welcome to our first session. Our next speaker is JP van Oosten, and he's engineering manager of the AI team here at n8n. And JP brings more than 20 years of AI expertise, and I just checked that with him, and it sounds true. It's long, but yes. He has a PhD from the University of Groningen and hands-on experience from multiple successful startup exits. At n8n, he leads our AI team at the intersection of research and real-world applications. And today, he will dive into practical methods for making AI-powered automations production-ready and show why evaluations are the cornerstone of reliable AI workflows. Take it away, JP.
Hello, let's see if my slides work. All right. Looks all right. So, thank you all for being here. It's hard with the lights to see all of you. So if you want to interject something, please shout. So today we'll be talking about evaluations and your AI workflow. So let's do a quick show of hands. Who is not using AI in their workflows yet? But one hand. OK. So hopefully you still get some use out of this presentation and little demo that I'm going to give. The more important question, though, who has experienced inconsistent AI outputs? OK, I think that's almost everyone that's using AI in their workflows. Who here has already been using evaluations? Couple of hands. So this is mostly a talk about how do you set up evaluations, how to think about evaluations, and things like that. I do hope that I get to some of the advanced stuff so that you still get some use out of it. So let's start first with why should I care about evaluations? Evaluations are a way to think about productionizing your workflow. So how do I put it into production? It helps you think about what's going to happen when my workflow hits the real world, like real users, real people asking questions to your agents, and things like that. Of course, there are LLM inconsistencies, so slight changes to your prompt, or sometimes even the same, can lead to wildly differing outputs. You can have context drift, so if you have longer conversations, the LLMs can gradually lose sight of the original instructions. And so you want to maybe check for that before you put something in production as well. There are edge cases, of course, so sometimes you have input variations like missing variables, unexpected formats, things like that also lead to weird outputs. And, of course, important, AI can change underneath you. They can change models, they can change APIs, things like that. Recently, Anthropic released their Claude Sonnet 4.5. Does your workflow work with that version? You want to check that. Maybe it's even better than before, but sometimes it behaves a little bit differently on your use cases. So when you are ready to make your workflow go into production, how do I actually do that? So there's, of course, traditional testing. You think about it as unit testing and things like that. But that really assumes that your workflow is deterministic, right? It always gives you the same output. You can really check whether the answer is correct or not, which is hard if you, for example, create a Q&A bot, right? You get an answer, but you have no idea of, is that answer going to be correct? There are also probabilistic changes. So sometimes, if you have a classification problem, how do I know whether something should be A or B, right? That is something that you can think about and why traditional testing might not be enough. So we need a systematic approach. So we need to address that non-deterministic nature. We need a way to assess that quality, and we need a system for understanding if our workflow is ready for production. And even if it's in production, we need to maybe check whether it's still moving along with all the use cases that you have in the real world. And so that's why you want to have evaluations. They are your safety net. They are making sure that everything works as you should. And they are objective metrics to help you build your workflow and track the quality over time. So how do I actually evaluate my AI workflow? And the first is you should probably start with some vibe checks. I hope this is readable for the people in the front. If you're in the back, you can look at the screen. But vibe checks are maybe not automated, right? But they're still very important. You want to use the thing that you're working on. You want to chat with your AI agent, you want to put some data into your classifier and things like that, because this helps you get an idea for how the AI is working in real life. It sparks ideas for what to actually check automatically later, and that helps you get a feel for what's going on in your workflow. And then you might move on to some deterministic checks. Things like, did all my tools get called? Is the classification correct? And things like that. And we have some things to show there. Did I retrieve the right documents? So when people talk about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, they often think about evaluating the answer at the end. But one of the crucial parts of a RAG system is actually getting the right documents, because that is what it basing its answers on, right? So does that part of the RAG actually work? And then finally, you can think about LLMs as a judge. And this can answer questions like, does this answer from my AI actually match the reference answer that I thought it should have? So this is an important part of these like quality checks of Q&A bots and things like that. Before I move here, any questions so far? Everything clear? Then let's move on to how you can use evaluations. So there are 3 parts that I'm going to talk about today, and you can use evaluations and then while you're actually building your AI workflow. You can use it just before you're going to put it into production, and you can use it to monitor while your workflow is in production. And that is mostly for things like, does the model change and whatnot. So let's talk a little bit about while you're building your workflow. This allows you to test different iterations of your prompts. So we made it easy to run over your entire data set with the workflow that you're building, so that you can quickly check whether all these cases that you collected are actually coming in correctly, that there's no errors at the end and stuff like that. So that helps. This is also for catching edge cases early. Put in some empty values, maybe some unexpected formats. And then finally, you want to iterate based on those evaluation results. You want to see quickly that your AI agent, for example, really messes up in certain use cases, and you want to correct for that by either changing your prompt, trying out different models, things like that. So that helps you when you start out with building your AI workflow. Then, when you're ready, almost ready to start putting it into production, you can start by setting up some monitors for checking performance and see how your workflow is improving from one version to the next. You want to get going on that. You also might want to check the cost-quality trade-off before you put it into production, right? So while you are running your evaluations, we automatically track things like the number of tokens that you use and things like that. So you can compare, for example, the number of tokens to the quality of your workflow. And that really helps with selecting one model over the other or something like that. And that's also where A/B testing comes in. You can test different models, you can test different prompts and stuff like that just before you put it into production. And then as you put your workflow into production, you hit the activate switch on your workflow and you integrate it into whatever you're doing. You want to keep monitoring that workflow, right? So you can build some checks for regressions. So you want to catch cases that used to work properly before. You want to check performance trends over time, so that keep adding these different use cases. Look at your executions and look at what your users are doing with your AI workflow, and keep adding those different use cases to your test set, so you can iterate using that and you can track it over time. And then, of course, you can check if new models actually help or break your workflow. So with the new Claude Sonnet 4.5, does that matter for your workflow? Does that help? Does it break it? Is it the same? Those are good things to see. And maybe you want to check, for example, if it's even faster for the things that you're doing and stuff like that. So that is some of the things that you can check as you have it in production already. So this is the scary part. I'm going to show it to you live. So there have been some people already showing evaluations before. I don't think that we've shown evaluations together with data tables in action yet. This is not a demo of data tables. It's a demo of evaluations, but I'm going to use the new data tables features to show it to you. And so if I go to this workflow, this is a very simple, basic LLM chain, and I attached a Anthropic model with a Claude Sonnet 4, and I can open the chat here. I can ask it anything. There's no real system prompt available here, so it's just plain old Claude. And I can ask it, for example, who built the city of Rome. And then it will come up with an answer, and it will figure that out. And this is nice, but how do I know whether this is actually correct or not? Right? How do I know this is in the right tone of voice? How do I know whether it's not confabulating things and stuff like that? And that's where evaluations come in. And I prepared a little data table. And this is what data tables look like. You can probably not read everything here, but this is, for example, the question, what caused the fall of the Roman Empire? And I have a reference answer here. And the reference answer is actually very important. So if I look at the reference answer, it says something like the immediate trigger for the fall of the Western Roman Empire, blah, blah, blah. It gives you an answer for what this is. And this is important because now I can check whether the AI gives me the same kind of facts as this reference answer. And let's go try that out to build it out. So what I can do is I can add another trigger. I can use the evaluation trigger. And here is a new tab that's called source. So that's a data table. And from the list, I can pick Q evaluations. Is this readable for you guys? Yeah? OK. No? OK. So, better? All right. So I picked this data table that I had here. And when I press run, it pulls up one of those rows from that data table. Right? We can see here the question and the reference answer. I want to hook this up to my LLM chain, but I cannot do that immediately because it's expecting the chat input from the chat trigger. So what I need to do is add a node, and maybe pull in the question and say here chat input. And now I can attach this to my basic LLM chain, clean it up a little bit, and I can say execute workflow. And what's happening here is that it does that, as you expect. And after it's done, you can actually see that it starts over, but with the next question. So if I look at the edit field, it now says what caused Brexit, and now what triggered the French Revolution, and things like that. So there's a theme for these questions. But it continues to run, and this allows you to quickly see, oh, hey, does my error, like workflow error out somewhere? Imagine that this is a more complicated workflow that does something with the output of the LLM chain. You want to check whether that's still working, right? And you can do that using this feature. Let's stop it now. But then, like after it run, it would be also cool if I can see the actual answers in the nice format that the data tables gives me. So I can add something here that says set outputs. And what that does is I can pull up the Q&A evaluations data table again, add an output, and what did I call it? I called it actual answer. So actual answer, and I can pull in the text from the LLM chain. So what that does now is if I execute this step, it will execute, of course, the previous nodes and stuff like that. And then we can, in a bit, when it's done, we can see that happening in, apparently not. I execute the workflow from the fetching dataset row, and that should give me an output in my data table. So here we see the fall of the Roman Empire was caused by a complex combination of factors, blah, blah, blah. So this works. It will continue running this over my entire data set. The reason why I think it didn't work before is because it didn't realize that it was started from the evaluation trigger. So I can make that very explicit, right? If I want to do something else in my evaluation, call another LLM in between my evaluations or things like that, I could do that by adding something that we call the check if evaluating node. And this gives you some if node that allows you to distinguish between an evaluation workflow and a normal workflow. And these outputs are nice, and they can help you, for example, if you have some checkboxes, you can quickly see whether something is correct or not, or things like that. So that helps you over time, while you're building, quickly visualize whether your workflow is doing on these values. Of course, this is something that you can help with your vibe checks, for example, and checking whether your workflow works, and etc. But I want to track that over time, right? I have this while building now covered. You can do this and use these set outputs while you're building your workflow. You add some use cases that, oh man, I need to tweak my LLM here, or I need to use a different LLM there, and stuff like that. And that helps while you're building, and because it's quickly iterating over your entire data set, you don't have to do that all manually all the time. But what happens if we want to track this over time and we want to see like something evolve over time, and we want to see what our models do over time? And let me save the workflow and go to these evaluations tab. And the evaluations tab help you set up your workflow, your evaluations. So this has two checkboxes that we already finished. We wired up the data set, done. We wrote the outputs back to the data set, also done. Now it says set up a quality score. And I can tap that, and I can see that there's this other operation that's called the set metrics node. And the set metrics node helps us evaluate if our data set, if our answer from the AI is correct. There are a couple of metrics that we provide here automatically. So there's correctness, helpfulness, string similarity, categorizations, tools used, but you can always define your own metrics. And here you can do whatever you want as long as it's a numeric output. Right? This is important. You want to be able to track it over time, so there's this graph that we can show later. But let's take correctness, right? Because we've been building out this Q&A bot, and we want to hook that up to our metrics, and we want to check whether it's doing well. So we need to add a model here, and we need to wire things up. So let me run this one again, and then run this. And so it will kick off the entire workflow from the right evaluation endpoint. And then I can start dragging things in my evaluation node. And what I want to do here is go to my when fetching a dataset row, and I want to pull in the reference answer. That's the expected, and put it in expected answer. And I want to pull in the basic LLM chain node. I want to pull in the output text, and that I put in actual answer. There's a prompt here that you can change if you think, okay, I have some very specific prompting techniques that I need to do for all these specific use cases that I have. Then you can change, for example, what 5 means versus what 4 means and stuff like that. Let's keep it the default for now. And I hit save. And what I can do now is I go back into the evaluations tab. And voila, the third bullet has also turned into a checkbox. And I can click Run Evaluation. And what this does, it kicks off the workflow for each of the values in my data set, right? So we have to wait a little bit, and maybe I can go somewhere where I already did that. I did it here, and you can see in evaluations here. This is what you get. So this is a table with some evaluations. And here you see what I mentioned before. You can choose between completion tokens, prompt tokens, total tokens, execution time. So you can measure, for example, this workflow is now running faster than before because I changed my model. But correctness is more relevant to me. So I changed something apparently in the prompt here so that it went from 4.2 to 3.4, and then it moved back up to 4.8. Right? This is telling me something about what the workflow did over time. And we can check it's still running, of course, because it's AI, it goes out to the cloud and stuff like that. But it's interesting because I can now click through to this run, right? And this gives me some more information, and I can see that these test cases all succeeded. I can see that correctness was 4 in this case, but other than that, it was mostly 5s. That's useful, right? I can go back to all runs, and I click this one, and this one finished with some errors. And that's also really useful to see, because now I can dig into this particular execution, see what happened there, and fix it if I need to. The interesting thing is, if I change my prompt, and this is what you see here, I think I cut something short, is that apparently it's talking like a pirate, right? This might interfere with the fact-checking of the prompt, but I also asked it to maybe insert a joke about a parrot. Okay, that's fun, but it's not adding to my factfulness of this answer. So that's why there were some points deducted. So you can actually also start to modify your prompt a little bit to see if the LLM as a judge is actually helping you evaluate that. That is the Q&A answers, and this is still running. It's terrible. There's a question over here.
Yeah, so at the top there, when you've run an evaluation, if you clicked on that first entry there, can you actually go to the execution?
Yes. Now, the question is, can I go to an execution if I click on a particular thing? Yes, this is clicking through to the execution, so I can see here what it did. I can see here that I actually added a system prompt that says, answer the user's question, but answer in the voice of a pirate. I can see that right here. And yeah, I can do that for all the other evaluations. So many questions. Okay, I don't know, how much time do I have? 5 minutes? Okay, let's do the questions. And I wanted to show you all kinds of cool stuff, but there are so many questions. Who raised their hand first? Let's go with you, sir. Yeah, you. Oh.
So what's your benchmark for correctness? Is it the initial data set you put in the tables, or because the next one could be more correct?
So this is why I have the reference answer in there, right? So I check with an LLM, I check whether the reference answer matches the one that's now generated by an AI. So I know what the answer should be for this particular question, for what caused the fall of Rome. I can check that against the newly generated answer.
The judge part.
Yeah, the judge then checks whether all the things are still in there. And this reference answer is really important, right?
My question would be, it perfectly works for static data, but I can have another branch of the workflow which actually brings the underlying values to check. Let's take example that I want to double check the recent stock price of something.
Yeah.
So how does it deal with that? So does it read the whole batch of the answers? Does it go piece by piece? So when it validates the piece, it's going to take from whatever it finds in data table at the beginning of a process. How does it deal with that?
So it depends on how you wire it up, right? So if I would wire it up after I have a full branch, I can wire it up later or earlier or things like that, right? So in this case, I just want to check my basic LLM chain. If I want to check a whole bunch of things, I would wire it up after those, or before and after those things that I want to check. So this is important about how you do that.
But my question was more, you have 20 examples. So would it go, for example, at the moment? My question was, what you have 20 examples, which we were waiting for execution.
Yeah.
So would it check whatever it found at the beginning of checking of that particular item, if it changed in a real time?
I don't understand the
Okay,
question.
so let me give you a specific example. So let's say you want to double check stock price. It's a stupid example, but I think it well explains the phenomenon.
Yeah.
Let's say I go into a data table to reference.
Yeah.
Is it going to pick the one by one?
Basically, you want to know whether it's pulling in data from other sources that might change on the fly. Okay, so yeah, that might be an issue, but then you would probably need to wire up some sort of static source of that data to pull in. Okay, does it properly work when I pull in some data from somewhere else? But there are other data sets that you could also use for that. So, for example, you could create a data set that checks whether your tools are all properly called, right? And if you can check that, then maybe you can use that.
Thank you.
You mentioned that one of the objectives is to A/B test easily. The evals table that you showed later, let's assume I want to do what you said, test model, test prompt, and so on. How would I see that, each of the variables that I change, that I'm not confusing things?
So let's see, evaluate models here. And what I did there was I used the model selector to make, for example, the selection between one model or the other. And if I go into evaluations, you can see here that it's not scrolling. I, for example, have a category accuracy OpenAI, and I have category accuracy Anthropic, right? I can compare these two in that way. And the data table will then look like something like, where do I have it? I have it here. So I have, for example, the model provider here. It's OpenAI or Anthropic. And I can, in my model selector, I can now say, okay, the first model is when the provider is Anthropic, and if I use the other model, if it's OpenAI. So I can use the model selector to select between these two. And you can do the same with prompts, right? You can put these different values, like you can put the prompt in your data table, And you can duplicate it over all your examples, and you can change, like, okay, I want to use this prompt if I'm evaluating. Yeah.
Hi, I'm wondering if you have the judge for the evaluation be an LLM, who judges the judge? So how do you make sure that the non-deterministic nature of the judge is not actually producing
That's a
false
very
positives?
good question. And so, yeah, you need to go in there and try things out, and then deliberately try to mess with it to see if that actually works. But you're right. Eventually, you should maybe even get like an evaluation for your evaluations. But that's really not necessary in most cases, because you're trying to do a very small part. You try to evaluate a small part of it, right? You just want to check whether the answer matches roughly the reference answer. But yeah, in theory, you're right. You want to evaluate the evaluator. And then who evaluates the evaluator of the evaluator? You get into this weird loop.
Hey, so I've been already using evaluations, and I think they're pretty cool. But actually, so first part of my question got answered now, because we experienced that we have inconsistent results. And for example, one of the main use cases that we have now is we are making a change, for example, of architecture to an agent, and we want to check if it's worth it to push it to production, etc. And then it feels like you need to run like evaluation 1,000 times or something to really get statistically significant or something result. So yeah, that problem exists. But also my question is, maybe it's not a question, it's like a feature request or something. So we've been experimenting with setting custom helpfulness metrics. And also you mentioned tone of voice. Yeah, assessing tone of voice as well. So right now you can only do that with adjusting the prompts pretty much. And I think it would be cool if you could like basically stick a workflow call or something where like more complicated logic of evaluation lives. So yeah.
Yeah, you can still get like the custom metrics if you want, right? You can do, if you have this if evaluating bit that I put here, you can make this branch of your evaluation, you can make it as complex as you want, right? You can put all kinds of logic there. You could even call out another workflow to do the evaluation. So that's perfectly possible. As to your first part, yes, sometimes you need to add multiple times the same test case just to get like a little bit of more confidence in these different test cases.
I think we're going to have to wrap up now. So if you have more questions, JP will be around, so you can find him.
You can find me here. Yeah.
Thanks, JP. You know what's going to happen now. So
that's really cool.
Tiny TV. I'll send you the file next week.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you.